What's cracking, yo? This is Be Real from Cypress Hill, right here on the B Shine. I think what inspired me the most to become part of the hip hop culture, hands down, had to be Run DMC. You know, we we would hear hip hop here in LA through a station called KDAY on the Mix Master show, which was DJ Tony G, which was he's like the Yoda of DJs here on the West Coast. Like he was the one that brought hip hop here to the West Coast, really. And he assembled a team called the Mix Masters, and they would play, a bunch of hip hop, throughout the weekends, like on a Friday night, because the show was on Friday night. And they introduced us to whatever hip hop that we did not have here in Los Angeles, because what we had here, I think, was the Wrecking Crew, Egyptian Lover, Ice-T, and whatnot. But they were, being East Coast being the Mecca, they were injecting us with a bunch of, the East Coast flavor, which Run DMC came through that. I was a huge, metal fan before I got into hip hop. And when I heard Run DMC, it was different because they were using like rock guitars and calling themselves the King of Rock and all this other stuff. And, but they were doing it in a hip hop form, and something got me about it. And I became a fan of them. And likewise with a few mutual friends. And, everybody does that thing when they're in a car, when they hear a Run DMC song. Somebody does Run's part, somebody does DMC's part, whoever the third guy or fourth guy is, they're assed out because, there was only two rappers in there. So, that was a big influence. And, when they came along right after that, you had LL Cool J, the Beastie Boys, and Houdini, and those cats, which were a big influence. And the really big influence also was EPMD. And it went from being a fan to doing it for a hobby. Because a lot of us were B-boys, popping and breaking, and some into graffiti and whatnot. And some of us made the transition over into the music, which I was one of them. And those groups were the ones that influenced me. In the beginning, I was, emulating what these guys were doing, because it was our influence. And eventually I found my own style with our group, Cypress Hill. We all found our thing, our sound, and our style. But in the beginning, it was the influence from those guys for sure. One of my early hip hop memories, and there's actually two. And Muggs was responsible for both of them. There was one time he had me come out to New York because he was from New York. He was from Queens. And, Sendog and myself were from Los Angeles. He had me come out there one year. And it was during a DMC, or not DMC, but the New York Music Seminar time when it was really big. It was the convention of conventions, whatever, And we went out there, and my first year out there, man, we were just barely doing demos at that. And the guys from Gangstar, Guru, and Premier, they befriended us. They were cool with us, man. And they even let us stay in their spot in Brooklyn, I believe it was. They had a spot in Brooklyn. And we kicked it there. We were partying with them till the sun came up, man. They were the coolest dudes ever. And who knew that we'd be down these 20 some odd years later. And it's really good to know those dudes because they became legends like a motherfucker too. You know what I'm saying? It was just cool to get embraced by those cats like that early on when nobody knew who we were, And the other one was still, we were at our demo stages, probably trying to shop our deal. Leaders of the New School were out. And they were like the big hype because they had a great live show, And all the great artists that we loved had great live shows. KRS-One, Run DMC, Public Enemy, the Beastie Boys. They had a hell of a live show. So, all of those guys were, we felt they were legendary because they made great records and they also were great live. They had the full thing going on. So, Muggs to reiterate that into me as we're doing our music. He took me to go see Leaders of the New School because they were around, they were around the time when we were doing our thing. Like, in other words, this is what we're going to have to compete with. So you better look at this, right? And man, it was a small club. It was like a box of a stage where only three guys could fit and just not even move around. They're just right in the same place. They couldn't move around. But they gave so much energy in that small space, and they rocked the fuck out of the club. Dinko D, Busta, Charlie Brown, they fucking ripped it. And I was like in awe. I'm like, you're absolutely right. I'm glad I seen this because, to compete with the hip hop that was going on in that day and time, you had to have energy on the stage and you had to be tight. And they were both those things. Busta Rhymes to this day, still amazing live artist. You know what I mean? My family, I think my mother took it really serious. I mean, my father always wanted me to be a truck driver. He always figured I'd probably turn out to be a gangster like one of my older brothers and a few of my uncles and stuff like that. But he was right to a degree. I went that route for a second, but I didn't end up driving trucks. But my mother tried to support me. She let me do what I was thinking that I needed to do at the time to, like, dive into this 100% and just dedicate myself to that, right or wrong, and it's a gamble you take because some people take that dive and they never go anywhere and people look at them like, what have you done with your life? You know what I mean? But as an artist, that's the risk you take, because you're passionate about your art, even if you suck at it. Unfortunately, sometimes you got to have those friends that'll tell you, hey, look, I know you're artists and, you've been trying to do your thing, but maybe the same for you, you know what I mean? But I mean, you got to go after your dreams no matter what, but you got to polish that shit. If you're going to do this, you got to be writing every day or every other day. You got to be practicing what you wrote, and you got to be out there performing, whether it's for 5 people, 10 people, 1,000, whatever, and honing your craft, because this shit is definitely a craft, and I think some people in this day and time take that shit lightly. I think some of the biggest highlights of my career as a front man with Cypress Hill, and just in the career of music in general. I mean, there's been a few moments. There was when we were invited to Saturday Night Live. I mean, a lot of people know about that. We got banned from that show right after that because Muggs lit a joint, which was planned. We had planned it. Only I was supposed to light it. And, there was a few different things that were supposed to happen for that show, but it didn't quite go the way that we wanted it to. But it still resonated though. But that was a highlight for us to be invited to SNL because, I mean, it was such a iconic show. It still is. I still watch it to this day. I grew up off of it. So to be invited to that, was very cool. To be banned from it, even cooler. You know what I mean? So a lot of people probably take that a certain way, like, oh man, I don't know why they banned me. I know why they banned. I know why they banned us. Shit, I can't be mad at that. It's protocol. The other thing was The Simpsons. That always gets brought up to me. Oh man, I saw you on The Simpsons, and that was pretty surreal because, I mean, this is a show that's Americana right here. This, that you've made it when they ask you to be on that show. So it felt good to be invited to do that, and that shit lives forever in syndication. So that it's always coming up, and the reminder is always there that we actually did that. So that was big. And then 94 Woodstock, such a big show. There was, I think, about 380,000 people there watching that particular day. That to date is the biggest crowd that we've ever performed in front of live. It was great, man. Those 3 moments. But I mean, there's so many, but those probably were the three. But I got to say, in the recent years, probably when we got inducted into the hip hop honors through the VH1, and then to go in with the school that we went in with, it was, I believe it was De La Soul, Naughty by Nature, Too Short, Slick Rick, um, and ourselves. And if I'm forgetting somebody, I don't know if I'm forgetting anybody, but we went in with that school, and it was great to go in with those guys because I mean, we're big fans of Slick Rick and De La Soul and Naughty by Nature. They were our brothers. I mean, we basically came out a few months apart in our albums and stuff like that. Toured the world. I mean, toured the states together and whatnot, and they helped pretty much launch us because they had the #1 record, and they chose to bring us with them on tour, and it set it off from there. So it was good to go into the VH1 honors with those guys, especially. And Too Short, I mean, what can you say, man? That's the homie. So it was just, that was a good time. So I think those four moments for me, those were probably the highlights. Yeah, the biggest challenges we've been able to overcome is the fact that because we're a pro marijuana group that we talk about legalization and all that, some of us miss out on opportunities. Like I know that Redman and Method Man have lost out on many opportunities, as well as Cypress Hill because of what we talk about, because of what we represent. But we've been able to overcome that, through the quality of our music, who we are as people, how we basically how passionate we are about this and how we talk to people about this and give them that education on it. And it ain't just about us talking about smoking on the record and, just it being all over the place like that. We've managed to convert people. We've managed to make a career for ourselves. And in spite of some of those obstacles they put up because of what we talk about. And, here we got Snoop Dogg, who is a household name, movies on TVs, he's got massive deals going on everywhere. So, I'd like to think that, along with him and Red and Meth, ourselves, we've been able to overcome those challenges that we've had early on. And I got to say, a lot of that has to do with a lot of the work that Snoop Dogg put on. So, he's a big credit to that because, I mean, he's one of us. He's like champions the cause, but he does everything. You know what I mean? So if Snoop could do it, we could do it. You know what I'm saying? I think there's two things there. We showed that you could take an underground hip hop group with the content that we had, which was very raw, and take it and put it in the mainstream and it becomes something where previously they weren't trying to do that. We kind of kicked in the door on that type of shit because you either had to be the party image or the squeaky clean image to get through on that mainstream shit. And we had neither. Well, we had the party, but it was an extreme party in the sense that we were talking about weed and with alcohol and all that shit, which was very taboo at the time. We broke through and showed that you can make a career of this. You can get through the mainstream with raw music. The other thing, obviously, is where we are today with regards to the medical marijuana laws that are in place, 2 states that are now legal and whatnot. We like to feel that we had a part in that, in creating the awareness for people to be more open-minded in how they look at marijuana and medical marijuana and the possibility of legalization. There's many stars that came through this game called hip hop, this industry. If it had not popped, wow, the jails and graves would be filled with many, many talents that you would never have known. Or, maybe the guy doing your taxes or your teacher or whatever. Who knows? The local drug dealer would have been that guy. You know what I'm saying? Who knows, man? I mean, the one thing about hip hop artists that a lot of people don't know is that there's a lot of motherfuckers with hidden talents. There's people that were crazy, athletes and chose up to be, you know, an artist rather than go the route that they could have went, maybe some sort of sports. There's other people that were gifted in the sense that, you know, they could put up a fucking portrait of you like spot on the money. You know, they were gifted in that sense that they had the mind and the hand coordinated together, that they could put up beautiful pieces like that. That kind of talent, that kind of raw talent. There's a lot of hip hop artists out there that are artistic in other ways, but you would never know that because either they don't talk about it and they just keep that to themselves. But there's a lot of shit out there about artists that a lot of people just don't know, and that's because we don't ask them the questions. And maybe that's something that they keep to themselves because that's the one bit of privacy that the outside world can't touch. For us, what we want to leave behind is just, you know, a legacy of good quality music. The fact that you know, guys that came from nothing came from nowhere with without any belief, no, you know, no belief in what we were doing as far as other people outside. That if you believe in yourself, you can do what the fuck you want to do. If you can see it, if you could dream it, just like they say, man, you can manifest it if you put the work behind it. You know, if you believe in yourself and you put the work behind it, you can make it happen. And that's for anybody. That, you know, a lot of people want to, you know, some people feel that that's only for a certain type of person, but that's for anyone. If you just believe in yourself and believe in what you're doing, you can achieve that, you know, and that more than anything. Because, I mean, you know, we could talk about, you know, the records we've sold and the places we've been in our lives and all that stuff and all the shit we've never, that we've got to see that some people will never see. But realistically, it's about that willpower that you have inside of you as a person, that if you tap into that and say, you know what, this is what I want to do, I'm going to do it, and nothing's going to stop me, you can get it done.